Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome to Leisrealtalk. It's good to be back. I haven't done a live stream for a week, and I went away to take care of a friend who has been supporting me in my YouTube effort. She has been proofreading for me and give me advices on language for all these years, and she recently is trying to recover from a health condition, so I needed some help. So I decided to take care of her. And I didn't know that where we were staying, the internet speed was miserable, so I wasn't able to do a live stream. But it was good. It was good that I got away for almost a week, and here I am. I'm back. The internet isn't. How's the internet? Can you guys hear me okay? Now I'm back. The internet speed here isn't good either. Okay? All right. Okay, let's talk about the drama in the South China Sea. And we've been wafting the confrontations between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea for some time and have heard about stories in which Chinese vessels harassed Filipino personnel by the use of water cannons, laser beams, and ramming of fishing boats. However, recently the skirmishes got escalated into to a new tension. So this Monday, June 17th, a fierce clash between the Chinese Coast Guard and Filipino military personnel broke out at the Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Island, and it's one of the tensest moments between the two countries in recent months and also recent years. I have a video. Let me just play that in case you haven't seen it. Here we go. Play. Yeah, these are the footages released um, by the Filipino authorities. So on June 17th, the Filipino personnel were carrying out a resupply mission at the Second Thomas Shoal, and they were met with Chinese aggression. Chinese vessels here in this video, the guys wearing orange vests are the Chinese. So the Chinese vessels chased down and deliberately rammed into Philippine boats, and the Chinese Coast Guards intentionally slashed um, Filipino rubber boats with knives and other sharp weapons, forcing the unarmed Philippine soldiers to fight back barehanded. The Chinese also forcibly boarded the Philippine boats. 8 rifles were confiscated. 4 members of the Filipino civilian rescue team were detained by the Chinese, although they were later released after negotiation. At least one of the Filipino rigid inflatable boats were destroyed. Um, and here you can see the Chinese were trying. Oh, yeah. But anyways, so one Philippine soldier lost a finger. And today, the Philippine government demanded the Chinese to return the confiscated guns and issue compensation for destroying Philippine boats. And they called the Chinese pirates. So I thought it's, we should call the Chinese the pirates of the South China Sea. However, China told a completely different story. They accused the Filipinos of sending ships from different directions towards the shoal. Of course, they claim they have sovereignty over the shoal. The Chinese Coast Guard patrolling nearby took countermeasures and legally repelled and towed the Filipino boats. They even found armed. This is the Chinese statements. They even found armed Filipino military personnel in small boats, and their Chinese personnel fearlessly boarded these boats, confiscated their weapons, and thwarted the Philippine attempt to invade. They used the word invade the Second Thomas Shoal. So In terms of timing, the incident happened 2 days after China enacted the administrative law enforcement procedures for maritime police agencies, which gives the Chinese Coast Guard the authority to use weapons against foreign vessels if they were deemed to be infringing on China's claimed waters. And this can involve actions such as boarding, detaining, and expelling foreign vessels and their crew members if they're found within what China considers its jurisdiction. And the law allows the Chinese Coast Guards to exercise law, law enforcement in disputed areas that overlap with the exclusive economic zones of other countries, such as the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. So previously, when this was announced at the end of May, Philippines President Marcos Jr. expressed his concern about this procedure, which he called could result in the detention of foreigners in the South China Sea. And he said it was worrisome. Surely enough, his concern became a reality in a few weeks. And the conflict may escalate into something even bigger. We'll address that later, but let me just give you a little bit of history on the conflict. So the conflict in a nutshell is that the Filipinos try to land on the shore where they have had a base since 1999. And the Chinese were determined to stop them. The result, unfortunately, is that the Filipino, their attempt failed and they suffered injuries. Did the Chinese suffer any injuries? We don't know. They might have, but we don't know from anyone's reports. So let's first take a look at the origin of the Second Thomas Shoal. And really, I want to reconstruct CCP's strategy from more than 10 years ago so that we can have a better understanding of where it's going from here on. And hopefully we'll understand the challenges the United States and the Philippines have at this moment. So let me backtrack a little bit and start from the 1990s. So the Second Thomas Shoal, which the Filipinos called the arranging shoal, is part of the Spratly Islands, and it's a ring-shaped atoll. It forms a lagoon in the middle, which can serve as a shelter for fishing and commercial boats. During high tide, the shoal is almost completely submerged underwater, and during low tide, most of it is exposed. So it's not suitable for habitation. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, countries in Southeast Asia, particularly in the South China Sea region, began asserting sovereignty over various islands and reefs. They took actions by occupying them and establishing a presence as a basis for claiming EEZs, or exclusive economic zones. The Philippines didn't have the means to engage in large-scale infrastructure projects, so they used the method of grounding a ship to establish control. So in 1999, the Philippine Navy deliberately grounded a decommissioned landing ship on the shoal and effectively turning it into a permanent outpost. Over time, they reinforced the ship with concrete to make it more stable. The Philippine Marines stationed on the Second Thomas Shoal are a small contingent of 7 men. The shoal is 105 nautical miles west of Palawan Island, so it's very close to the Philippines, and it's within the exclusive economic zones of the country. According to UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, a country's EEZ extends 200 nautical miles from its baseline. So it is within that zone. Now, China also claims sovereignty over the Second Thomas Shoal, And in this dispute, China's economic strength um, has overpowered that of the Philippines. China has been pressuring the Philippines to give up the outpost. However, the shoal's close proximity to the Philippines makes it vital for them for their security and economic interests. So the Philippines cannot afford to abandon it. Before China started building its artificial islands in the Spratly Islands, it had no bases in the deep South China Sea area. Making regular patrols around the Second Thomas Shoal was difficult for the Chinese. So the Philippines were able to supply their troops freely. China began its large-scale construction of artificial islands in the South China Sea around December 2013, a year after Xi Jinping came to power. This ambitious project continued through roughly the end of 2015 or October 2015. And China built 7 military outposts. China built 7 military outposts by transforming 7 coral reefs in the Spratly Islands into man-made islands. And these artificial islands now house a range of military infrastructure. Of the 7 islands, the closest one to the Second Thomas Shoal is the Mischief Reef, which is just 14 nautical miles away. So China can station destroyers and even heavy bombers there on this island, on this man-made island. So being just 14 nautical miles from the Chinese military base, the Second Thomas Shoal is right under China's nose, whereas the nearest large Philippine island is over 100 nautical miles away, making it hard for the Filipinos to reach the shoal. You see, the whole situation has flipped. You can say that the current crisis is the result of the construction of the artificial islands by the Chinese in the area. So instead of negotiating with the countries on territorial issues or disputes in the region, Beijing built these artificial islands. And once these islands were complete, they serve as military bases for China's coast guards and the PLA. With these islands as bases, Beijing chose not to attack the shoal directly or try to station its military personnel there. Instead, Beijing chose to send coast guards to block the Filipino troops, cutting off their supplies, forcing them to leave. It's territorial struggle that has been ongoing for a long time without open warfare, without opening fire, without involving weapons. And China has accelerated this effort since 2021. And the blockade became particularly intensified, or this effort to blockade the shoal has intensified around 2023, making it increasingly difficult for the Filipinos to resupply their outpost. Using these, now let's talk about China's strategy, right? Why does Beijing want from this effort? Using these islands as bases, and now through the enactment of its new maritime, whatever you call that, it's not even law. It's called Maritime Administrative Procedures. Beijing can use force against countries like the Philippines in the name of law enforcement. And once the Filipino does withdraw, Beijing then is successful in achieving its goal. According to the United Nations Convention, reefs can be used to claim economic zones, but they must be naturally formed, not man-made. China ignores this and and after the artificial islands were put up to use, China used them as um, China claimed that they are, their justification for claiming, sovereignty over these territories. So China completely disregard the UN Convention. What it wants to do is, through these aggression, implement its rule. Um, so what happened this past Monday doesn't look too good for the Philippines, because their resupply routes were disrupted and blocked by the Chinese. You know, the Chinese were successful in blocking their resupply effort. Um, and this is very concerning, because what will happen from here is going to be, it's very tough for the Philippines. The Filipinos can use small planes from nearby islands to drop supplies by air. But it can be tricky due to wind and also the small targeted area. Plus, it would make the Filipinos look like they have retreated or they have backed down from Beijing's aggression. So they shouldn't do that. But if they beef up their resupply operations, and the Chinese certainly would continue its aggression, then what will happen next can be quite contentious. And if this situation continues, it could turn into a serious diplomatic and geopolitical crisis. Without support, I think the Philippines um, may have no choice but to retreat. I'm not saying that they should, but I'm just saying it's going to be a very sticky situation from here on. This is because the CCP's actions are well planned. Like I said, 2 days before this skirmish happened, China, enacted this administrative procedure, right? And so this is part of Xi Jinping's overall strategy to use Chinese law as a weapon in international disputes. And this method is um, before I talk about that, I want to say why I say this is going to pose as a major diplomatic and geopolitical crisis, is because it's very difficult for the United States to respond. I mean, the United States and the Philippines have a mutual defense treaty, right? So the entire intention by the CCP, the plan is to see how the United States would respond. But it's very difficult for the US to respond, because um, if the United States sends US Navy, such as a destroyer or a carrier group, then it would seem like they are overreacting, because the Chinese would say that it's only their coastal guards. Why would you send your navy here, right? And then the Chinese will also argue that we didn't use traditional weapons for armed forces, so then the U.S. cannot send its navy forces. And then the Americans cannot send U.S. coastal guards either, because they're not involved in international affairs. And then the other challenge is the Chinese didn't use traditional weapons. So the question is, will the Filipinos and the Americans arm themselves now with knives and blades too, like the Chinese do, or like the Chinese did, right? So the CCP has calculated these moves carefully, because they know politicians like Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden, they like to play by the rule. So these rules will restrict Americans in their choices responding or supporting the Philippines. Because how are they going to respond? It is very challenging. But without supporting the Philippines, how are they going to resupply their outpost? And if they don't, and if they give up the outpost, if they give up the shoal, then the Chinese will be successful. I mean, this is the entire, this is the CCP's calculation. And so this method is being used right now mainly on the Philippines so far. The Diaoyu Islands in the East China Sea, which is disputed by the Japanese, also frequently see um, sees this similar type of incidents. But the situation in East China Sea is not as bad as the South China Sea. This is because the CCP isn't as aggressive, because the Japanese military, Japan's military strength is greater than that of the Philippines, and Japan's Coastal Guard is powerful enough to counteract CCP's aggression. So Beijing is very careful there. And it also, of course, it fears triggering the US-Japan Security Treaty. But it sees the Philippines as a weak link in America's island chain strategy. And also, China has more leverage over the Philippines due to its economic influence. In 2023, bilateral trade between China and the Philippines dropped by 16%. And yet China still remained the Philippines' largest trading partner and a key economic player. So this gives China leverage in pressuring the Philippines into concessions. Of course, the Philippines can, kick off, or the Philippines and the United States can kick off their mutual defense treaty at the April meeting of the leaders from the U.S., Japan, and the Philippines. Biden emphasized unshakable commitment to the security of Japan and the Philippines. But given for the reasons I stated, the technical challenges the United States has, because of that, whether the Philippines genuinely want the U.S. military to do something for the dispute over a small reef remains to be seen. So I don't think the Philippines or the United States are ready to kick off to kick the mutual defense treaty in action because of this, because of a knife wielding fight over a reef. And the Chinese knows this. This is by design. The Chinese know it's very difficult for the Americans to step in. And that's why that's CCP's calculation. So in addition to claiming sovereignty in this disputed area, I mean, over the distributed shoal, or in addition to this, shall we say, the second tactic, the second goal that Beijing wants to accomplish is that this type of incident gives Beijing, or gives Xi Jinping the chance to test the U.S. commitment to defending the Philippines as a proxy for its commitment to Taiwan. If the U.S. fails to support the Philippines this time, which is likely, for the technical difficulties I just spelled out, then the CCP will use this in its propaganda to convince the Taiwanese people and the rest of the world, by saying that the U.S. will not protect Taiwan. And this will help enforce the narratives the CCP has been promoting all along in Taiwan, which says that the US is only interested in taking advantage of Taiwan and is not genuinely interested in defending or protecting Taiwan. And the Beijing will use the Philippines as an example to justify its narratives. And Beijing has calculated that it has nothing to lose by being aggressive because the U.S. is, is tied up right now into other wars and have no bandwidth to deal with, you know, skirmishes involving knives and blades and rubber boats. So I think it will continue with its aggression, targeting the Filipinos in the area. But I think this issue is a serious one. So therefore, what's happening at the Second Thomas Shoal is crucial for Taiwan, all of Asia, and the United States. I've said that a potential conflict over Taiwan might first flare up in the South China Sea because it's a good testing ground for Beijing to gauge U.S. responses, to give Washington a stress test to gauge U.S. responses, and also to gauge U.S. support to its allies in a moderately pressured area or territory. China cannot test U.S. resolve in defending Taiwan in the Taiwan Strait, as it may get out of control and inadvertently start a real war. So I think war in the Pacific will not break out overnight, but security crisis like this type in the Pacific region will develop gradually until they reach a tipping point. We don't know when we will reach that tipping point, but we can see that the trajectory of Beijing's actions particularly in recent months, is heading in that direction. And the Philippines and the Second Thomas Shoal are certainly important parts of Beijing's overall plan. By the way, I just want to mention that when Xi Jinping first came to power, I think he came to the U.S. in 2012, but in the early days of his reign, he visited the U.S. and Obama was the president, and who gave Xi Jinping pressure on not building these islands in the South China Sea. And Xi Jinping promised Obama that he wouldn't. I think the Americans made a serious mistake by believing in the CCP leader. And I'm not just saying Xi Jinping, I'm saying all of his predecessors cannot be or could not be trusted. So I think this was clearly a lesson that the Americans have learned. They should not have believed him. So if they are still believing anything they say now, then they will pay the price sometime later. So that's all I will say about what's happening in the South China Sea between China and the Philippines. I hope this is helpful. All right, let's see. Let me see if people have questions for me, since I have not. I think the internet speed isn't very ideal because I see this static that happens from now and then. All right, let's see. All right, here I have someone. Here's someone from called Knocking Futz. What a name. Anyway. All right. I think you're just trying to say something that people normally wouldn't say. Lei, how long do you think CCP can hold on to power? Not very long, but I think we should ask the question back to the rest of the world. The question is, how much can the rest of How much can people inside China, as well as people outside China, all these governments and leaders, can put up with this kind of behavior, like the ones that we've seen in the video? I think it's up to them. I think we've been tolerating this kind of behavior for too long. So in a way, we've allowed them to be in power. So I don't think the CCP, it's very, the regime is very fragile. I think the outside world just has is not strong enough or is not smart enough to come up with a strategy to deal with, to deal with the crisis. I mean, I hope I have already illustrated the situation. I mean, the CCP is calculated; it has nothing to lose by being aggressive. And when I said that, I think there's something wrong on the part of the free world. How could it be like that? We're not saying the CCP is so smart that they have this ultimate wisdom in coming up with a strategy that guarantee its success, right? It's not very smart, but so it only tells me one thing, that we have not been very smart. It's not that the CCP is very smart. It's because the world, has not really give some good effort in coming up with a strategy, because it can be. But from its perspective, it has nothing to lose by continue to be aggressive, by using knives. I was just talking about, India and China recently also had some border skirmishes, right? And then I know India and China have an agreement where within 2 miles of, not 2 kilometers along the border, the military personnel from each side are not allowed to use like weapons, like guns, ammunitions. They can only use batons or sticks or knives if they want to engage in a fight. But I was told that the Chinese have come up with some deadly knives that are probably worse than than a gun. So, but why do you think that's the case? Um, because they want to change it's part of CCP's unrestricted war, because they know if they use ammunition, it's going to lose to the United States, because the US has built the most powerful military and weapons. So it wants to stay away from that. Instead, it wants the world to follow its rule by using knives and sticks and all these, and then that will effectively tie up the the United States hands, because you don't know how to play it. Like in this case, what are you going to do? You can't send your carrier groups. You cannot send a destroyer. You cannot send your navy. Are you going to give all your soldiers a knife and a stick? I mean, it's just so. I don't. I think we need some smart people to come up with some good strategies. That's all I'm saying, because something doesn't make sense. All right. All right. Charles Womack, have you heard of 学习强国?学习强国?学习强国? Xi Jinping's study Xi Jinping's thoughts? Yes, I've heard of that. It's such a joke. It does not make a lot of sense. Um, all right. But thank you. Thank you for the donation and the support. 888. That's very auspicious. All right. All right. Let's see. Any other questions? I'm just picking random question. Oh, somebody, let me answer this question. I think this is a very common question. So people often ask me, so why do for the rest of the world, I mean, people think, why your economy is not doing well? Your people are so angry with. I mean, you have so many problems domestically, like high unemployment. Why are you causing troubles everywhere? Why are you causing troubles in the South China Sea? And then having these, and then along the Indian borders. Didn't we see that a few weeks ago? Like, why is the CCP creating all these troubles for itself, and what does it want? Um, it's very interesting from our perspective. That doesn't make sense, because why do you want to upset everyone when you already have enough troubles? My answer is that's the thinking of a normal person, because a normal person or anyone who's normal wouldn't want that, because when you have your plate full, you don't want to have more troubles. But that's not the mindset of the CCP. Um, Communist Party members thrive in conflicts. So the more chaotic the world is, the more chaos, troubles that are happening around the world, it has a better chances of getting what it wants. So that's why it's always, it has that's its mindset. Um, so that's why CCP is not very good at negotiating, because when you negotiators generally have a goal, like a good goal, right? Achievable goal in your mind. So they're not, but they are good at creating chaos and then take advantage of the world in chaos and win. It has succeeded every time. Think about why Cultural Revolution happened in China. Why China went through so many crazy political campaigns when the whole country was turned upside down. It's because it likes chaos. It thrives in chaos. And that's its mentality. It cannot think, it's not programmed to think otherwise. So that's you have to know this is its limitation. So the world needs to understand this. Um, all right, let's see. The Three Stooges. Michael A. Mayo. May I ask, how is the economic structure of China's coast guards organized? Most of the ships are dual use and engage in shipping, fishing, etc. So, who pays for the commercial loss when the ship is knife fighting, not fishing? Well, China's coast guards are essentially its military. The vessels, like Chinese Coast Guard vessels, are the retired destroyers from the Navy. So it's part of its unrestricted warfare. Its coast guards are military personnel, um, dressed up as coast guards, or as a civilian, force. So when you ask me the economic structure of China's Coast Guard organized, I mean, it's all paid by the government. It's all. Are you asking about the funding? Most of the ships are dual use. Yes, I mean the dual use is to cover up. The dual use is not to make money. You will think the dual use is way maybe the Chinese Coast Guards will want to make some money by doing some fishing. The dual use is to cover up. So you cannot say it's military. It's civilian. It's a civilian vessel. Um, that's its purpose. Who pays for the commercial loss when a ship is knife fighting? The government pays for everything. The central government pays for everything. All right, but thank you, Michael, for the donation. Okay, from Hugh. Harley, a question for you. What do you think Putin want from visiting Vietnam? Do you think Vietnam trusts the CCP? The Vietnamese do not trust the CCP. I'm telling you that. I don't think there's anyone in the world, even the Gang of Four. Like I made a video talking about the Gang of Four, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. None of them trust the CCP. The only reason the CCP still has some friends or allies is because of money. It's using money to buy loyalty and friendship and support. So it's very important to cut off that economic pipeline. When it doesn't have money, it will lose all its friends. So I don't think there's anyone who trusts the CCP. What does Putin want from Vietnam? I think Putin needs help from anyone he could get at this point, right? And Vietnam, after all, is a communist country, and so any help, economic help, they can get from Vietnam. I mean, he's trying to get. Um, all right, let's see. The last major war China had was against Vietnam. Correct. That was during the Deng Xiaoping's time. I mean, that was ordered by Deng Xiaoping. All right, let's see. Uh, that's all. I don't have any questions. I'm doing pretty well, I guess. I'm just randomly picking some questions. That's all. Somebody asking why don't the other countries just give China economic sanctions like with Russia? Good question. Now we're hearing all these evidence that how China has been supporting Russia's war engine. But the big question is why? Why they're allowing it to happen? I don't know. Right? Okay. That's all I will say. I thank you for joining me, and I'll see you this weekend. Stay well. Okay, bye bye, and stay cool. It's really warm here. Okay, bye bye.